Welcome to the Parallel Lines podcast. This is my new rebranded podcast because before we had the Single Mama Club podcast and now we're running with the Parallel Lines podcast. So welcome. I hope you really like my new setup and I'm going to be ad-libbing as much of these podcasts as possible. I've always been quite structured before, but I really get into my flow and the passion really comes out of me with these topics that I talk about around post-separation abuse and high conflict co-parenting. So it is better when I can just ad-lib. So we're just going to freestyle this. So roll with me. And I hope you enjoy this episode where we're talking about when you realize when you actually can't co-parent with someone. So what you might find is when you get into these high conflict dynamics and there is constant drama, there is constant conflict, you'll have people that will say to you, just don't be so bitter. Just move on. Just communicate better. You both need to compromise. And so many things about what they say make absolute sense. It is absolute common sense for you guys to just put the child or the children first, put your egos to one side, let the conflict just be in the past where it belongs and move on. But unfortunately for us, we are constantly dealing with someone who moves the goalposts, who constantly accuses us of being too controlling and then actually withholding information and not being flexible enough. And essentially what that brings to our door is a sequence of events that means that this is never going to be an amicable co-parenting dynamic. So ultimately, I want you guys to know that sadly, nothing you do will ever be enough. And I want to tell you a really good story about one of my very first clients who ever booked a strategy call with me when I first set up the Single Mama Club. And she was from the Northeast and she was so lovely. I'm from the Northeast as well. So we got on like a house on fire. And she had been co-parenting with her ex for 10 whole years at this point. And she said, I honestly kid you not, verbatim, these were her words. She said, I've just given him whatever he wanted for 10 years to keep the peace. And she said, and I've only just realized that it's never going to be enough. And I said, yeah. And it's so sad because that just literally goes to show that you're dealing with someone who just wants control. And I say this in my academy so much. These people believe that they are the puppet master and you are the puppet on the string. And it's not like getting you to do as much as possible. It's just seeing what else can they get you to do? What else can they exert their control over? It's literally like a 2-year-old toddler who suddenly found their voice and wants to see what else they can get out of you. What else can they do? What else can they get the adults around them to do? It's exactly the same scenario. And it's through those actions that she could really see that this was someone who was never going to be satisfied with whatever she did, with whatever she gave in, with whatever she tried to do to please him and just keep that peace. Because the reality is we can't keep the peace with these people. We literally just have to parallel parent. And I don't want to confuse matters here. Parallel parenting isn't matching their energy because the bar is very low in terms of their energy. I just need you to be so focused on your line, your direction, your path, and how you are going to show up for yourself and for your children. That's what parallel parenting is. Because we know what we're in for. We know that we have to co-parent with these people for a long period of time. Some people have said to me on my strategy calls how it is like a life sentence. And I can understand and totally appreciate why they're saying that, because this is what it feels like. However, the one caveat to that is it is going to be a life sentence if you constantly let them be the puppet master and let them move the goalposts and let them dictate how things go. There is ways that you can take your power back and you can absolutely co-parent and parallel parent with strategy. And that is what I'm here for. That is what I do for you guys on my platform, on my social media, in my strategy calls, but most importantly, inside my Single Mama Academy. So, like I said, let's take a minute to just think about and feel how that lands, because the reality is we have to co-parent with this person. There is no getting around that. They are half of our children. And we need to always be putting our best foot forward, being the best co-parent that we possibly can be by being child-focused, court-safe, and just being what I like to say is the teacher's pet of co-parenting. Now, When you've got someone who is constantly creating conflict, that is so difficult. And then this is when you'll have those phrases and you'll have people say, you just need to compromise. You both just need to communicate better. And that is so perfect advice for someone that actually wants to co-parent peacefully, because we are actually dealing with someone that doesn't. So let's take a moment to just acknowledge that. Feel your feels with that, because it sucks. There's no professional way of me saying it in any other way. It is awful to think that this is the person I've now got to co-parent with pretty much for the rest of my life. And that needs acknowledgement. But as much as we need to acknowledge all of that and all of the bad feelings that come along with it, we also need to make sure that we focus on our mindset and our approach, because this is actually how we feel like, and we are taking our power back and actually being able to reclaim some of our peace. Because remember, we cannot control what that other parent does, how they choose to show up, what they choose to do, or anything else in between. All we can control is how we respond and what we do. And if they want to do the work and become a much calmer, more regulated person that is absolutely child-focused and court safe, then brilliant. But we're not going to sit around and wait for that day to come, because it might never come. So we only need to focus on us. So let's get into the steps about how do we know that we are dealing with someone that can't and won't co-parent. And what I always say to my clients inside my academy and on my strategy calls is that you will have so many instances where you are flexible, you move the goalposts, you do favors, and it will always, always, always come back to bite you on the ass at some stage. And it will be those instances that will make you kick yourself and you'll think, why did I even bother? Other instances will be where you, as a human being who makes mistakes, will make genuine mistakes. Maybe you'll get some contact wrong. Maybe you'll get the time for pickup or drop off wrong. And when you make those small mistakes, they crucify you for it. And these mistakes never come from a place of being malicious. They're always a genuine mistake. But it's the fact that we have someone in our life that we have to deal with who will jump on any small little thing that goes wrong and absolutely crucify us over it. That's when we know that this truly isn't someone who is magically one day going to just be a great co-parent that understands and appreciates that sometimes mistakes happen, sometimes dates or times or arrangements get forgotten or mixed up, and that's totally understandable. That's when we know. So one thing that I need you to know is to not kick yourself for those times where you've maybe been a little bit more relaxed and you've been more flexible, because that's always going to come from you wanting to be the best co-parent that you could possibly be. If you're dealing with someone that constantly makes you regret doing that, just know that it's not about you. You're not soft, you're not weak, you're not stupid or anything like that. It's purely, I actually want to just applaud you, because it's purely coming from a place where you're trying to be the best co-parent you can be. And that is always going to be something that you will never regret ultimately, because you're always trying to do your best for your children. And that is exactly what you should be doing. One of the other things that they might do is disagreeing with any and every suggestion that you might make. Now, there will be so many times where you think, I don't even want to ask them this question, because it gives them potential power. It gives them potential control. And I know that they're just going to run with it. And they're going to see that as the door opening to more potential manipulations down the line, if not now. The thing is that you should always, always, always try. Always put yourself out there. Make the suggestion, make the request. And if they keep coming back and saying no, then at least you can constantly then go back and say, look, I've tried. Because eventually it's my belief that when you're dealing with someone like this, if you haven't already been to court and got a court order, it's inevitable, sadly. Now, don't get me wrong. The goal is to avoid court at all costs. That's the goal. But when we're dealing with people like this, it very, very, very rarely goes any other way, because they leave us with no other choice. Because these people, they need a higher authority to actually dictate the rules. because they don't respect us. They're never going to respect us. They lack any kind of common sense. Even if they do have it, they choose not to follow any kind of common sense or any kind of decency, because ultimately it doesn't serve them. Now, don't get me wrong. There might be some times when they do. There might be flashes of this, and that's great. But this is not something that they can actually be consistent with. They can't sustain this type of behavior. And that only means that eventually we will be going to mediation and we will be going to court. So when you end up making suggestions and they are constantly batted back, then at least when you get to court and you're sat in front of a judge, then at least you will be able to evidence and show that you've tried to be communicative. You've tried to be collaborative. And each and every time you were shot down. Now, when we go and try to make all of these different suggestions, and when we try and be collaborative, I need you to approach it with the mindset that it's probably not going to go the way that you wanted. And we are just ticking a box because we need to be seen to be collaborative as well. If it goes right, brilliant. But if not, then at least we've ticked that box, and then we can move on with whatever plan A was in the first place. So before I dive into the topic of how we really smash court and speaking in front of a judge, I need to tell you that that is definitely a topic for another podcast. But essentially, what I want to leave you with in this episode is that you guys need to just be the teacher's pet of co-parenting. And let me give you some really basic tools that I teach all of my clients that you need to start executing from today to reclaim your peace and start really co-parenting from a place of strategy. So one, we never have face-to-face conversations. Yes, we might have a little back and forth at handover, literally regarding the child or the children, how they've been, any medication that's been administered, any events that need to be noted. That's it. Because what I need you to realize is that if it was spoken, it didn't happen. It's not evidenceable. Everything needs to be written down. Everything either needs to be in emails or it needs to be in a co-parenting app. Some people still communicate on WhatsApp. I would absolutely tell you that WhatsApp is the last thing that you need to be communicating with your co-parent on. Why? Because all of these messages on there can be edited later and even deleted off. So you might have a really crucial piece of evidence in there. If you're not quick to export that chat or screenshot, it could be gone. You've seen it and you know it happened, but they will claim that it didn't. So this is why we need to rely on co-parenting apps where you actually can't edit or delete. Everything is time-stamped properly. Or if you can't do that, it needs to just be on email for each and every communication. Alongside that, I want you to make a point of having a good hour in between receiving a message and actually responding to it. Now, this is where you need to use your own judgment, because you absolutely need to respond if it's an emergency. You be the judge of that. But the reality is, if they're emailing or texting, it's probably not going to be an emergency. So you use your own due diligence with that. But that is one of my golden rules inside my Single Mama Academy. We absolutely do not respond within that first hour. Why? Because you're going to be triggered. You're a human being. You're going to feel all of these emotions. You're going to feel upset. You're going to feel anger. You're going to feel rage. You're going to feel sadness. And what this golden hour does is it allows you to have that space. It allows you to have those feelings. And usually by the time the hour comes up, you've actually calmed down a bit. You've got a bit of perspective. You've weighed up everything within the argument or the drama or the conflict that's going on. And you're then able to respond from a much more balanced place, which is always going to be the goal. If you want extra help, you need to come and get my Safe Send app, because I've created it myself. It's got my brains in it. It's as if a co-parenting app and ChatGPT had a baby. You can literally post in there, I really don't get on with my ex and he wants to swap weekends this weekend and I want to say no, and it will just spit out the court-safe, child-focused, best way to respond to him that is not inflammatory and won't fuel any more conflict. I'll put the link in the show notes for that, but I digress. When we talk about healthy co-parenting dynamics, very rarely it's going to apply to our situations, and that's really sad. And I wish for so many, and I know so many of my clients say the same. Now, I just had a conversation with someone about 2 weeks ago, one of my clients who I speak to very regularly, and she just said, I wish we could just, he could just pick up and drop off. I could just pick up and drop off. We could just say, hey, do you want to have her extra? Or do you want to have him for this weekend? I've got some time. Or do you want to go to the theatre together and share this moment for this show that the child loves? That would be perfect. We would love that. But sadly, we're dealing with someone who would use that opportunity to gain information, gain ammo to put in their back pocket and use against us at a later stage, which is just really unfortunate and sad. But the good thing is that we now know this. And if you are watching this episode and you've already come to this conclusion, and you can really see that this type of person is the person that you're co-parenting with, then you now know that you absolutely have to co-parent from a place of strategy each and every time you have an interaction with this person. That is the only way to co-parent, for want of a better way of putting it, because you're never going to have that really lovely, flexible, relaxed, happy-go-lucky co-parenting dynamic. Not now, not in 10 years' time, probably. Not if you get married, not if they get married. There will still be this dynamic that you have to constantly navigate. And the minute you drop your boundaries, they will make sure that you realize that that was a mistake. And it's sad. Like, it shouldn't have to be this way at all. And like I said before, we don't want it to be this way. But unfortunately, we can only control how we show up. And we've got to protect our peace. And everything that I've listed out in this episode is exactly how you protect your peace. So my final thoughts are, if you have spent months or even years believing that you're just bad at co-parenting, or, it's just something else that's happened to knock the boat, or it's just something else that's come along to upset the apple cart, I need you to know that it's actually not that at all. It's the dynamic that you've been dealing with. And I really hope this episode has helped you to see that, yes, this is the reality that you're living with and you are going to have to live with. But also, there are ways that you can reclaim your peace and you can carry on co-parenting just in a different way than what the traditional societal values and parameters say that how we should be co-parenting, because we can't co-parent from that point of view. If you've got any questions, please put them in the show notes. And thank you so much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast, and I'll see you on the next episode.